Welcome and good morning to our viewers in Europe and good afternoon to our viewers in East Asia, and a special welcome to our two speakers, Dr. Hinata Yamaguchi and Mr. Sokolin. This is the second session in our second series of the strategic talks. The first session was held on 3rd December, and the recording from that session is available on isdp.eu. My name is Mats Engman, and I'm head of the Korea Center at ISDP in Stockholm. These strategic talks are aimed to further promote dialogue and exchange of views related to the developments on the Korean Peninsula and in the region, and to further increase the understanding of the many factors and policies that impact security developments. For these talks, we normally invite scholars and experts from different backgrounds and nations to a friendly conversation for about 1 hour. The conversation will normally include two experts and we strive to have a series of conversation within a rather short time span, covering the same issues, but from different perspectives. This would, we hope, enable us to identify possible differences in understanding, assessment, and policies. The strategic talks are public and recorded, but we normally do not take questions from the audience, but please feel free to comment using the chat function on the bottom of the screen. In today's talk, we will concentrate on the domestic political and economic development in North Korea, asking and answering questions such as, what is the current economic and socio-economic situation in North Korea? What are the main challenges? And what impact will the improved relations with Russia have? And on the domestic political situation, the conversation seeks to explore implications of North Korea's new policy on unification, the risks of sending North Korean soldiers to fight in Russia, and the overall security situation for the Kim family and the regime. But all of you joining us today are interested in what's happening on the Korean Peninsula, and we have all, I think, followed the dramatic events unfolding in South Korea over the last week. So I have asked our two speakers, and they have agreed. So in the end of this session, we will spend some time and trying to give a few comments on the events unfolding in South Korea. I'm very happy to have two true experts to help us better understand North Korea for today's strategic talks. And first, I would like to welcome and introduce Dr. Ryo Hinata Yamaguchi. He is an associate professor at the Institute for International Strategy at Tokyo International University. He is also a senior non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council's Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security, and an adjunct senior fellow at Pacific Forum. Dr. Hinata Yamaguchi specializes in defense and security, transport governance in the Indo-Pacific. He previously held position at the University of Tokyo, Pusan National University, Universitas Muhammadiyah Malang, and the Japan Ground Self-Defense Forces. He received a PhD from the University of New South Wales. Mr. Anton Sokolin is a data correspondent at ENCO News based in Seoul and a former reporter with Reuters and TASS news agencies. He covers sanctions, trade data, work with satellite imagery, and by proxy write about Russia-DPRK ties. He is a frequent writer at ENCO News and has written extensively about subjects ranging from crop data and strong harvest to Russia-DPRK military cooperation. I've asked our two experts to each make a short introduction, and after which we will engage in our conversation. So with this short introduction, please, Ryo-san, the word is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that kind introduction. And I'd like to thank ISDP and especially General Mats Engman and the team for this great opportunity. So I mainly, as you said in the introduction, I focus on defense issues, particularly defense planning and defense readiness, so the more technical operational aspects. But for much of my career, I've focused on the North Korean military, given my language skills in the Korean language. And that has, you know, allowed me to sort of look at various aspects of North Korea, not just the military, but also the political aspects, the economic aspects, and social aspects to get a more comprehensive understanding about the North Korean military. And so that has allowed me to sort of think a lot more about what is going on in North Korea. And in my 15 something years that I've spent looking at North Korea, the North Korea today is quite different from the past. And if I can summarize that in one sentence or phrase, it would be that North Korea is applying is following the same strategy, but with different tactics and different tools. We see this in all aspects, political aspects, in the military, economy, society, and so forth. And as my friend Anton would, talk, he has a lot more knowledge about this. The what we are seeing in North Korea today in 2024 is different from what we saw in the 1990s and so forth. Politically, Kim Jong-un seems to be a more confident, stronger leader than his predecessors, and he has really, I think, changed a lot of minds of people who were not so who thought that he would not last long. 13 years ago when Kim Jong-un first assumed leadership. Kim Il-sung is still the founder. He's still seen as the founder, but his credibility seems to be limited to being the founder of North Korea, whilst Kim Jong-un, he's the one that has inherited and also modernized North Korea, realizing the visions of both Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. That's how I see it in the political aspects. Economically and socially, developments are taking place. You can see it here and there through various videos, satellite imagery, and also just the media output from North Korea. Indeed, there's a lot of things that are symbolic, but there's still, there's no that there's a lot of development compared to the past. Although a lot of it is focused in Pyongyang, of course, but again, you can see in the behavior of the people in North Korea. I mean, you can tell that there are a lot of aspects that are not orchestrated. Militarily, the Korean People's Army and the paramilitary forces work on the same strategies and defense planning doctrines, but with modernized and diversified capabilities and means of operations, and that's where I look at a lot. There are still a lot of weaknesses in the North Korean military, particularly logistical aspects and education and training, but still, the North Korean military is definitely different from the past. So I want to keep my opening remarks short because I want to make sure that there's enough time for discussion, and Anton will bring in a lot of great stuff. Uh, but I think with all this, what we can say is that you know it's not business as usual. We used to treat North Korea as business as usual, that North Korea is the rogue state that is doing all these mischievous things and crazy things and so forth. But that's not the North Korea we see today. Again, North Korea knows what its strategy is about. They're very strategic. And if they were not strategic, they would have collapsed a long time ago. And that's why I think it's very important to look at even the small details that are sort of epitomizing developments that we have in North Korea and also in North Korea's behavior. So, I'm gonna leave my remarks there to leave more time for the discussions. But they're my quick points. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ryosan. So the focus of maybe we are dealing with a different North Korea now than we think we are. So let's come back to that. Over to you, Anton, in Seoul, please.
Thank you very much. Very glad to be here. Thank you for the invite, our distinguished speakers, distinguished audience. Yes, my name is Anton Sokolin. I work as a data correspondent for NK News and for our other product, NK Pro, where I analyze all kinds of different kinds of data coming out of North Korea, and not only. In particular, I focus on trade data with China. I also analyze satellite imagery. I track different kinds of vessels, coal smuggling, arms smuggling, all kinds of proliferation activities. And since I'm a Russian national, I speak Russian, and I also focus on the North Korea-Russia relations, and that's become sort of my primary beat as of the moment, given the situation in Ukraine and the troop deployment, the North Korean troop deployment to Russia. To add a few things to what Mr. Hinata Yamaguchi just offered is that indeed it's a different North Korea that we are dealing with right now. Given the past few developments of years, well, let's say a year and a half, basically, since Russia practically dragged out North Korea out of its pandemic-induced isolation, the country's prestige and the status on the international arena has elevated dramatically from a backwater that is basically teetering on the brink of hunger to a regional power that is capable of not only sustaining its own regime, but procuring and providing weaponry to other countries. Seeing these developments, of course, makes one ponder how that is possible and where we are headed. And I hope we will have a chance to shed some light on these developments together in this discussion. Thank you very much. I probably will leave my remarks here, and we will revisit all the previous points made by Hinata Yamaguchi and Mr. Engman.
Okay, thank you very much. This is very so. Let's stay with this. That's both of you have highlighted the different North Korea, and North Korea is maybe not the same North Korea as it were in 15 years ago. So transferring that into, let's say, the political situation, and do you see that there is a strong correlation with this different maybe more self-assured North Korea and the changes in unification policy that we saw being announced at the beginning of this year? What's your view on that one? Do this thing, are they coordinated and or are they separate? Maybe Anton?
I believe Rio was about to say a few words, so probably I will.
Okay, please, Leo.
Oh, sure. Okay, well, sorry. So I guess I mean the first to take a jab at that, I'm not sure if it was completely coordinated. Rather, I see that North Korea's domestic political sort of processes and policies and so forth, and also this new policy towards South Korea, they're sort of running in parallel. I'm not sure if it was like a planned coordination of the two. But what I see, at least at the domestic realm, because I know you want to sort of focus on that part, is that we are seeing some changes in the way that Kim Jong-un, and I think this one he planned this. He has tried to modernize again the faces of North Korea, not just the inner aspects of the faces. So for example, we see less of the old style, old-fashioned ideologies or sort of these symbolic things that were, seen as even out of date in many of the other social states. We are seeing a lot of those things disappear. In Pyongyang, elsewhere, and so forth, we see less references to Kim Il Sung, Kim Jong Il, and those I think so show us that Kim Jong Un, he feels that symbolism is going to drive North Korea into further trouble, right? And he's learned that from the previous generations. And he has tried to sort of shed away with the things that are old-fashioned, rather focusing on the more substantive aspects. Again, economic development. Less symbolic sort of political ideological sort of messages and all that kind of stuff. And so again, just like a quick stab at that question, I think that's sort of the first thing that sort of comes to my mind is that those political things. We also seen that translate into society. I mean, there was a YouTube video just the other day that I was watching. I think it was a Russian tourist, Anton, correct me if I'm wrong here, who went to North Korea, and this person was taking videos of almost everything. right? And if you watch that video carefully, again, you see people like, looking at their smartphones or, just chatting about things that are just unrelated to politics and so forth. And, the North Koreans didn't stop this guy, right? So obviously, you can see that North Koreans are not afraid of showing or opening up to some extent, right? And they know how to keep things under control. I think that's the point. They can show some things, but they do that because they know how to keep things under control. Whereas, several years ago, they weren't willing to do that.
Anton, over to you. This about the new unification policy and how it kind of correspond with this kind of what Ryo-san mentioned as the more modernized or different North Korea.
Yeah, just to add a few points. Indeed, I would also agree with that. There is less dogmatism in North Korea right now. Dogma has taken backseat, and practicality has taken precedence. And what we are seeing right now is that at least in North Korean propaganda, we are seeing more focus on consumer goods, on prosperity, on bolstering the livelihoods of people, and improving standards of living. So, and at the same time, we're like what Ryo just mentioned. I probably know the video that you're talking about. Indeed, it was quite fascinating to see this. Snapshots of real life in North Korea, because strangely enough, you would see that people are smiling there more than they do in South Korea, especially given the recent events happening in the country. But that's off topic. Getting back to your question about reunification. I would also add about unification. I would add that I wouldn't also read too much into this. I would say that they are indeed these developments are indeed in parallel, but this is a very interesting strategic convergence of these events. When we're seeing the Russia factor, we are seeing the pandemic that, of course, informed a lot of actions of the North Korean leadership, and then we are seeing the natural. To some extent, natural development that North Korean leadership reviewed and revised its attitude towards the South. Scrapping the unification policy book basically comes as just a logical continuation of Kim Jong-un's policy. And now, but at the same time, it stands out compared to what his predecessors did. And given the new dynamics in the world, where North Korea has to up its status, has to actually project its power beyond the borders. It comes as just one element of it. And given the North Korea's relationship with Russia, when North Korea is so engaged, we're just seeing it as another junction, another convergence point of these two. But I wouldn't say that they are completely coordinated or they were pre-planned exactly in correlation with one another.
Okay, let's stay. I have one more consideration when it comes to unification. Maybe that's because I'm not as deeply understanding North Korea as you are. Because if I understand it correctly, I mean, one of the factors that seems to be important in North Korean politics, domestic politics, is the kind of the story, the narrative, the history, and all these kind of things. And suddenly, what Kim Jong-un did is he broke with his father and grandfather's policy on unification. I don't know if we have full understanding of if the constitution was revised or not. So is he running a risk that this will kind of alienate part of the especially let's say the older segment of the population by doing this, or is so what's your view on that one? Ryo-san, please.
Yeah, so this new policy towards South Korea and unification is an odd one. And I'm still having trouble understanding this in some way, because on the one hand, you see North Korea, saying that unification no longer, South Korea is not a partner for unification. You see them destroying anything that was symbolic of unification and so forth. At the same time, we can also kind of forget that late last year and early this year, North Korea specifically said that if there's a war with South Korea, that they will annihilate South Korea and then incorporate South Korea under their control, right? So In some ways, I feel that there's a bit of a language issue here. In that when North Korea uses the word unification, which is 통일, what they mean is peaceful unification through some kind of consensus with South. But otherwise, right, what we will normally term as unification by force, right? North Korea still has that at hand, right? So, what I guess one thing that we can say is that it's not that North Korea has given up on peaceful unification, or they have tended to give up on peaceful unification, but they still do have ideas about attacking, invading, right? They've got that in the back of their mind because if South Korea is still there, that's still going to be that's always going to be a concern for North Korea. One other thing that I would add is that this problem, the big problem that comes from this is that North Korea now sees that the military is the only tool that can solve any issue with South Korea. But then it goes back to the old saying, if the hammer is the only tool that you have, every problem looks like a nail, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the big problem that I see with this new policy towards South Korea unification. So I'll leave it there. Over.
Okay, thank you. Anton.
Just to add a few things, I would agree with that, but I also would remind our audiences that this is South Korea that considers North Korea part of its legitimate territory. And Yoon's rhetoric about promoting liberalization in North Korea has been in play for many months now. And well, of course, now we are seeing that the man is in trouble himself. But nevertheless, this idea has been floating around. And I'm not saying that South Korea would actually attack or anything like this, but it does play into this game between North Korea and South Korea when North Korea sees the South as a threat that aims to promote liberal ideas that are deemed basically heretical in the North, and that adds another element to this antagonistic relationship between the two. That's just my little quick remark here.
Okay, I'd like to move over to the economic side and and try to see if we can better understand the let's say the North Korean economy and the challenges and how important Russia are and the balance from a North Korean perspective on its relation between Russia and China. So that's a lot of different questions. But if we start with trying to focus on the overall situation of the North Korean economy and some of the main challenges they have, and also this about maybe the urban-rural divide and the introduction of the 20 by 10 new policy. So if I can ask you, Ryo-san, if you have any comments on the overall situation for the North Korean economy?
Sure. So the North Korean economy, from what I see, I mean, we still do have the old problems such as the a massive divide between the urban areas and the rural areas, or we can even say Pyongyang versus the rest. That's still very, very clear. However, I think North Korea today, from what I see, is North Korean, not just the people, but the industries, the government institutions and so forth. They are using new tools that they did not have before, right? And we're talking about some, various computing systems, automated systems of other kinds, and all of that. There are new ways of doing things. There are new some means of economic activities in North Korea. On top of that, again, if we look at the way in which North Korea has embraced information communications technology, there are some amazing things going on over there, despite the capacity of North Korea. I think, Anton, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think we're starting to see some things like electronic payment and stuff like that. Again, if you look at the various, videos and news that come out or photographs that come out from there, it does look quite different from what we saw in the past. Now, what that means is that the North Korean people and also North Korean industries have more diverse means of going about their activities. Now, it may not necessarily lead to greater productivity, right? And may still have some problems in efficiency. But I think the fact that you have people who are more familiar with new technologies, that allows North Korea to sort of more opportunities to produce, some things that do things in ways that they could not do before, and that can open up some new paths.
Anton, you agree with this about that there are some new interesting element in North Korean economy?
Yes, that's true that we are seeing a lot of new technology being implemented in North Korea. Of course, we are seeing mobile phones, we are seeing smartphones. We know that there is multiple messaging applications. Well, there is a messaging application that they use. There is a intranet service, right? There is different payment systems. They are using QR codes. We all know that. Uh, but apart from that, we are also seeing that um, Kim Jong-un's policy of reviving the country's economy did hinge upon technological modernization. And the focus on at least on state media and propaganda is that we need to implement more computer-based systems. We need to implement digitalization. We need to boost productivity through modernizing. Even the talk about using artificial intelligence has been present. So it was a focus. And just going back to your question about 2010 policy, we are seeing that North Korea is pushing forward. They're trying to develop a. Of course, the policy itself, just to remind our audience, 2010 refers to building 20 more factories in each province or county or city, major city, in the span of the next 10 years, and boosting productivity by doing so. The issue is that indeed there could be some problems with procuring supplies, with allocating resources, but at the same time we're seeing that there is a push, there is a government push to do it, and North Korea, however little, however maybe awkward, it's still trying to catch up with the rest of the world, and modern innovations, AI technologies, digital technologies, they are all penetrating North Korea as well, just by different means. Sometimes it's illegal, sometimes it's illicit activity, sometimes it's smuggling from China. Making knockoffs of Chinese products. We just recently we had this major exhibition in North Korea where they presented their latest advancements of information technology goods. And we've seen that, yes, there's multiple smartphones and maybe some the household appliances, and some of them bear striking resemblance to those made in China. And at the same time, it's very hard to judge North Korea for doing that because it looks like it's just a rational strategy. Getting back to our previous argument about North Korea being quite rational strategy of survival. If you want to develop your country, sometimes, and especially in the situation like North Korea, when you are under multiple sanctions, there is an unstable country, political unstable country down south, with a strong alliance with the U.S. These kind of circumstances push the North Korean leadership to reassess its strategy and employ sometimes ways that probably in the West or elsewhere would be considered illegal, illicit, and sometimes unfaithful. But in the end, we are seeing that it's kind of playing into North Korea's cards. And well, of course, the 2010 policy just started. It's too early to tell, but at the same time, there is at least some indicators and hope that it's going to pan out pretty well.
Thank you very
Sorry,
much.
sorry, if I can just jump in there for a moment.
Yes, please.
I think, yeah. So I guess like what Anton just told us is a reminder that for Kim Jong-un, economic development is do or die. I mean that his credibility and leadership rests a lot on how much he can develop the economy. And without that, he can't. There's no justification for developing the military and also even his political leadership. That's one. However, there's one aspect, and this is something that Anton and I have been talking a lot about for nearly a year now, and that is the transportation systems in North Korea are still very substandard. And as long as the transport systems, road, rail, air, and sea, as long as the infrastructure is there at that level, we might not see the full economic development that North Korea maybe may potentially have. And so I think there's going to be still a lot of limitations. So I'll just leave it there. Thank you. Thank you.
But I have a question to you, Ryo-san. You spend a lot of your research on the North Korean military, and as far as I understand, in overall economic development, the military-industrial complex, if I may call it that, plays a very, very big role in overall economic development. Is that still valid, or do you see a more kind of diversification of the overall economy, or is the military still the most important and driving force?
I mean, yeah, so great question. So certainly the military industry is the one that has, developed grown the most. If we look at the course of North Korean history, that's clear. However, there are some, both strengths and weaknesses in North Korean military industry in that in recent years, we do see North Korea being much more capable of producing missiles that fly, at least, right? And they're getting a lot better at that. We can see that in the tests and the exercises that they conduct. On the other hand, however, if we look at, for example, some of the other platforms of the North Korean military, such as submarines, North Korea launched a new submarine last year, or commissioned a new submarine last year, but is based on 1950s, Soviet technology. So I think in some areas they are advancing, in some areas they are way back, and that's probably where they're trying to tap into some Russian technological input in some way. They are still very short. From what I understand, they are short of spare parts because the weapons that they have, they're old, right? And so they keep on using that. But that means that there's going to be wear and tear. They need to repair that. But the thing is that they don't have the spare parts, and there are significant imbalances. Just like the military, there are significant imbalances in the military industry too.
Okay, over to you, Anton, and this, which is one of the area you have studied quite a lot, and you mentioned that in your introduction. This, if I call it the Russian angle, how important is this new relationship with Russia for the economic development in North Korea?
Just as Ryo pointed out, North Korea, so the infrastructure, transportation is one of key issues for North Korea. At the same time, we should add that electricity and electric supplies is also another acute area of concern for North Korea. It's been struggling with it for years. At the same time, we are seeing that they are developing hydroelectric plants. They have built several over the course of past years. So there is some progress in that. But why I'm bringing this up is we should take a look at Russian delegations that have visited North Korea over the past few months. Well, let's say since July 27 last year, there has been a constant flow of delegations to North Korea and vice versa. And one of the delegations that actually piqued my interest was by electrical engineers. And the talk was that most likely Russia is eyeing certain maybe contracts with North Korean government to actually improve its outdated grid infrastructure. Of course, we are not seeing anything in the open. It's not like they publicize these deals. They just mentioned briefly somewhere that this delegation visited North Korea, but we don't see any like memorandums. We are not seeing many statements, but this is the assumption. And this is just one tiny glimpse for our audience to just understand that there is actually a multitude of areas where Russia can become a very reliable and useful partner. Another area, when we were talking about, for example, the construction industry and the modernization drive in North Korea, well, procurement of materials, that comes as another area where Russia could step in. At the same time, it's know-how in building, designing, and actually opening new buildings. That also could be quite useful. And Vladimir Putin himself, when he met Kim Jong-un last time in Pyongyang, he mentioned one interesting thing that probably many North Korea watchers noticed as well, is that Russia was ready to help North Korea finish or build or either finish the construction of this major hospital in Pyongyang. And the medical industry, the medical field, is another area of concern because North Korea, no matter how well it fared through the pandemic period, it still took a serious blow. We know that there were COVID cases. We know that there was major problem with the provision of medicines, and it's another point of concern. And at the same time, we're seeing that North Korea is extremely interested in upping this end of its relationship with Russia. It sends multiple delegations to Russia to different oncology centers. Focusing on cancer treatment. There is other exchanges. Orthopedics is another one. And just to add a few, when we're again linking it together with the modernization and economic drive, we should remember that when they finally actually open those factories, and those factories gonna start producing certain goods, where are these goods gonna be sold? That is another area. And now we are seeing that North Korean companies, particularly our team and K-News and K-Pro teams, have done rigorous research into what kind of North Korean companies are already in the Russian market, what are eyeing the entry into the Russian market. And we are seeing that it's a continuous growth. And while there are still concerns whether these products are going to be in demand, there is at least this drive, and Russia seems seems to be ready to open its gates, to open its doors for North Korean products, and that could be another stream of income and another source for bolstering the economy, and of course probably for the weapons of mass destruction program, because those are two linked inextricably.
So, would you agree, Anton, that the strategic partnership between Russia and North Korea is more than shells and missiles to sustain the war in Ukraine?
Yes, I do think so. And well, if we take a look at the name of the agreement, it's a comprehensive strategic partnership agreement. Comprehensive, I think, is key here because it encompasses so many areas. In multiple articles, they deal with pretty much everything: disinformation, artificial intelligence, space exploration, technologies, computerization, everything that is possible to imagine, I think, was just jam-packed into that agreement. And at least in some aspect, we are seeing that the two are ready to deliver on that promise, and they're working in that direction. Of course, the quality of this arrangement and how well it's going to work out, it still remains a big question. But at least there is this signs that it's on.
Yeah, thank you. Ryo-san, would you agree with that the partnership with Russia is more than just let's say the military partnership and shells, artillery shells and missiles to the war in Ukraine and military technology back? And may I also ask you a question on the no, leave it there. Take that one first, please.
Yeah. So very quick on that point. Basically, yes, I agree with all the things Anton said on that comprehensive partnership. And I would also add that, again, this is the reason why they're doing this is because they see eye to eye and they see that this is a win-win deal. And we see this in economic aspects, military aspects, and various others. Even for the deployment of some of the North Korean troops to the Russian military, and I emphasize that part, to the Russian military. These are more like mercenaries, and that in itself was almost like an economic deal as well. I mean, I see more economic dimensions to it than the military dimensions in many ways. And so I think there's it's still a very transactional relationship, of convenience, but it is still based on win-win solution on various aspects.
Ryo-san, you deal a lot with regional security issues, and what's your take on how North Korea is trying to balance its kind of newfound relations with Russia and its old traditional, very strong dependence on China?
Yeah, so there's a bit of an odd triangle that is emerging between the three. However, I mean, we all know, and North Korea knows very well that economically, it depends a lot more on China than it does with Russia. And no matter how deep the relationship with Russia gets, it's not going to turn around. I think that's a fact. And we can talk about sort of the trade dynamics, but also just the infrastructures between China and North Korea and North Korea and Russia. I think that part's obvious. However, at that point, I do have some issue with some people who say that China is angered or, unhappy about this relationship between North Korea and Russia. I think that's a little bit too simplistic. I do feel that they may be uncomfortable, right? But the Chinese also know that the North Koreans will rely on them in the end. That's one. The second aspect is that if we look at sort of the military dynamics of the relationship between North Korea and Russia, China may also see this as, oh, the North Koreans are doing the dirty jobs that the Russians have asked us, but we don't really want to get involved with, right? China wants to keep its hands clean on this issue, but the North Koreans are going to do it for them. So, I mean, I think they sort of see this as something that they see a convenient aspect to this relationship as well. On the last point, I guess, is like there's a question about whether this will be a trilateral alliance. Maybe, but the problem is that I don't agree with ideas or these views about alliances in the same way that people look at U.S. Japan, U.S. South Korea, U.S. Australia.
Yeah.
Alliances in amongst those countries are still seen more as transactional ones based on convenience, but they don't really put their lives on the line for one another. And so I think we might see like a comprehensive strategic transactional relationship between those three, but I don't think it'll be like a trilateral alliance like an institutionalized one, at least for now. At least for now.
Yeah. I like to move to a what I understand is a very, very important issue for Kim Jong-un personally and for the regime, and that's internal stability. And we know, and especially people dealing with North Korea know very well that North Korea is probably one of the most kind of controlled nations in the world, where people are controlled in a way that is maybe unprecedented. But we have also recently seen several new regulations and actions to even strengthen that already very strict control with increase ideological training for the military and targeting the younger generation, to mention two of those aspects. So do you think or understand this, that Kim Jong-un is a little bit, maybe not afraid, but he's worried about that the internal stability, or is he in firm control of the nation and the elite? If I start with you, Anton.
That's a very good question, actually. Thank you very much for that. It gives a lot of thoughts right now. Well, if we analyze what has been going on North Korean state media, is that Kim Jong-un has been trying to portray his image as a capable and confident leader who is always surrounded by young people, who is popular with young people, who projects confidence. At the same time, we do see slight indications that there could be certain uncertainty and maybe everything is not so well. For example, recently, he appeared in public visiting elite units, army units, and he was surrounded by his bodyguards, which is not an unusual thing. It happens all the time, but we could see how armed they were, and it was all on display. And it kind of, in certain academic circles, it did raise a concern whether there is maybe some hidden fear that, well, those soldiers that he is actually visiting right now could do something unpredictable. Of course, it's very dangerous to read into this too much, but still. And I think probably another aspect that we want to bring up is the fact that Kim Jong-un has deployed thousands of young soldiers to Russia, right? And that probably also comes as an interesting factor that we want to scrutinize a little bit. Of course, there is no testimonies or letters or any documents that would back it up and say that no, actually North Koreans are outraged by this. We simply don't have those testimonies, and whatever hearsay we have, well, we should treat as such. But one could imagine that if these people are taken out of the country and brought elsewhere, and we don't know the arrangements, so we don't know what's going on. We know in Russia, if a soldier is killed, there is a generous compensation, there is support for families, there is pensions, there is all kinds of payments for wounds and etc. We don't know what kind of arrangements there are for the North Korean soldiers, and whether we don't even know actually what their salaries are like. Are they getting the same money as the Russian soldiers? Is it going to be paid in rubles or in dollars? We don't know many things, and these kind of vacuum of information sort of creates creates a breeding ground for all kinds of theories. And but one of them is that you can imagine that probably there is a certain concern. I wouldn't say that it would reach a critical point or it's mass unrest, especially when we consider the numbers, right? It was about 12,000 soldiers. It's not that big of a number, but at the same time, it's still individuals, it's still people, and it's still families. At the same time, I'm contradicting myself, but I still have to make this point. North Koreans spend a considerable portion of their lives in the military, and very often they are detached from their families. And normally it's very rare occasions when they actually go home and visit them. So that also creates another layer of secrecy to how this whole arrangement functions. And of course, it would be devastating news for someone to find out that their relatives were killed in a far distant land, and they will never return from the military service. So I will just leave it here.
Ryo-san, what's your take on this about internal stability and if Kim Jong-un is still feeling confident that he controls the regime, the elite, and the people?
Yes, I think every dictator is always afraid or concerned about their own regime security. I mean that's given. But also, I mean, North Korea and Kim Jong-un specifically is, I think, becoming more innovative or pragmatic or something about the way they exercise that authority. And that's why I feel that, Kim Jong-un, his own, I mean, I think he's basically the same age as me, but, he comes from a generation that grew up through hardship. Right. And they also grew up with all these outdated things. And so he also went overseas. So he understands that, some of these old style symbolic things are irrelevant, or not so important. And rather he's finding ways in which he can still maintain control whilst allowing the North Korean people to be more exposed to some modernized culture or whatever we like to express it. One thing that I do notice that is changing in North Korea is that the way in which they sort of express or present their royal family has also changed, and we can see that with Kim Jong Un's daughter, who is appearing here and there in various things. And there's three possibilities here. One is that she is the successor to Kim Jong Un. That's one possibility. Second possibility is that she's sort of representative of the North Korean youths or children or something. And the third possibility is that it's almost that she's a known figure because she's the daughter of Kim Jong Un. In other words, sort of like the princess of North Korea. And so for me, having grown up in UK and various other countries, I also see that as like we are familiar with these things where the royal family is still shown off to the public in these ways. So I think with that, what North Korea is doing, or what Kim Jong Un is doing, is that he's trying to maintain control through some modernization, but also so showing to the public that he's a family man, instead of some mysterious character. And so I think that's one way in which he's trying to close that distance with the general public. So very quickly regarding personnel, we do see some, news about, has this person been purged or arrested or whatever. yeah, we do see a lot of that. We do see a lot of senior personnel changes. However, one must know that in the North Korean military, you have about 1,000 generals, which is just a
1,000?
ridiculous number. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, I can count the number of generals in Japan, for example. But what that means is that North Korea also has to go through some kind of bureaucratic revolving door as well. And so I find that the frequent changes under Kim Jong-un is not just because of purges or whatnot, but rather because he's trying to find the right combination of personnel to make things work. But in some other areas, he's been very consistent, such as we see the same technicians and some officers when there are some missile tests or drills. So again, I think we need to be careful about this regime security thing. There are obviously some concerns, but also there are many signs to say that Kim Jong-un is in fact confident with his leadership.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So let's pause this very interesting discussion about the domestic situation in North Korea and focus the last 10 minutes or so on what's unfolding in Seoul as we speak, I suppose. So if I may ask you, Anton, to make reflections, observation, comments from a Seoul perspective on what is happening at the moment, and what if you dare to make any predictions on let's say the future.
Well, it would be very hard for me to make predictions, but actually this opportunity presents me with this actual situation presents me with an opportunity to make one. To summarize basically what happened just over the past week, we President Yoon, the president of South Korea, declared martial law for about 2 hours and a half. And that triggered a chain reaction where lawmakers deemed it unconstitutional, anti-constitutional, and basically tried to they reverted the martial law. They and now they are claiming that it was anti-constitutional. Yoon is facing lots of different problems, including the impeachment motion that was already in place before, and it basically we're in the state of constitutional crisis right now. At this point, we know that President Yoon has been banned from leaving the country. Lawmakers pushed through the motion of launching a special investigation into him. And I just read a few headlines popping up right now, basically, is that Yoon is prosecution does consider Yoon one of the key suspects in this case. Suspecting him of treason and steering treason and steering trouble. So at this point, it's a very complicated situation. We are seeing that Yoon's rating has dropped dramatically. We are seeing that public support is very low. We are seeing that even his party members, the ruling party, the party that maintains the parliamentary majority, even they are not entirely in sync with him. At the same time, they're clinging to power. They are trying to preserve the order. And currently, even though they disagree and they publicly said so, they're trying to work out a strategy on how to make President Yoon step down without triggering the impeachment motion. So it's a lot of trouble, but we are seeing it right now that none of this ends very well, and for Yoon at least. I don't. If we are seeing that there is already an investigation going on against him, we are seeing that most likely his declaration of martial law was unlawful and anti-constitutional. You probably can guess what kind of consequences are awaiting him. You don't need to be really, Cassandra to tell that.
So do you believe or think that we will, let's say, in 4 or 5 months from now, have a new presidential election?
It is entirely possible. There is still, of course, could be several black swans and surprises because even though the Democratic Party, the opposition party, is doing relatively well, they are riding this wave very well, and there is a growing support for Lee Jae-myung, the leader of the party. The problem is that there still could be provocations, there still could be internal unrest, and we don't know how quickly the situation is going to end, because this could drag on, like you said, for a few months. It could end tomorrow, and but at a certain point we will have a new election, and that will practically put an end to the whole entire debacle.
Okay, thank you, Anton. Over to you, Ryan-san. If you can give us some observations and your personal view on how does this is being assessed and viewed from a Tokyo perspective?
Yeah, so I'm glad you didn't ask me about the domestic situation, because like Anton, I don't have a crystal ball that tells me how things are going to be in 4 or 5 months. But I think what we are feeling in Japan right now, and maybe other countries too, is concerns over how this will affect the bilateral relationship with South Korea, or even multilateral relationship with South Korea. And over the over the last couple of years, especially under the administration, we've seen a lot of developments, in Japan-South Korea relations, in political, economic, and also defense and security. And so, of course, what he did was undemocratic, right? But he is also someone that did push ahead with this, or dared to push ahead with this, and it seemed to have worked in terms of approval. I mean, I haven't heard too many people saying that his policies have been overturned because of all of the developments in the security relationship. I think the problems that he suffered from is like more domestic, not rather than foreign policy and security. Now, the concern is obviously what the next president of the administration of South Korea is going to be like. In the meantime, until we have a new president in South Korea, if we do have any changes, I don't think we are going to see any major steps forward or advancements in Japan and South Korea relationship, or even US, for that matter. But if we have someone coming in that has a totally different view, there's a possibility that things will completely be just reversed. However, although it's easy to be pessimistic about this, and there's a lot of people here in Japan saying that, okay, all this, we've just wasted our time, like, investing so much in this relationship, it's going to be reversed. I would say hold on a minute right there, because we have at least built a precedent in terms of strong security cooperation between Japan and South Korea that we've never seen before. Before, it was always one step forward, one step back, but now we actually saw 2 steps forward, or even 3 steps forward. And so even if it's one step back, there's still something there, and we know where to come back. And also given the threats from China, North Korea, and Russia, and so forth, and cooperation amongst those powers, I think the geopolitical situation is different. So although we hear a lot of rhetoric from the opposition party, we may, I'm hoping at least, and a lot of people in Japan are hoping that things are not going to be as bad or unstable as it may seem.
I have one final question for the both of you, which is the very, maybe a difficult one, but I like it anyhow. Unusually, in similar kind of situation, it's been extremely quiet from North Korea over the last week. So, do you have any kind of understanding why North Korea is so quiet? And if I even think that some of the the provocative actions that North Korea has been pursuing is not taking place anymore, like the trash balloons. So why is North Korea so quiet?
If I may,
Yeah.
when the previous presidential crisis happened in South Korea surrounding former President Park Geun-hye, North Korea was pretty vocal at that time. So, but at the same time, it was a slightly different period of time, different circumstances, and now we're seeing that it's slightly moderated its approach to its foreign policy, and one of the aspects is that it's wait and see type of approach. We are seeing it very clearly with US President-elect Donald Trump, where North Korea also didn't comment on his victory at all. It was not on any state media. Similarly here, we are seeing that North Korea is refraining from publicly speaking on this issue, seeing how the situation is going to progress. At the same time, we can see that throughout a good share of Yoon's term as a president of South Korea, North Korea has been criticizing his presidency. They have been criticizing his administration, and pretty much used every opportunity to highlight any anti-Yoon protests in the country as a major issue. So at this point, I think it's refraining, it's waiting it out, and soon, when the situation becomes more or less clear, we're going to see a statement either by it's going to be either an editorial by the Rodon Shinmun newspaper, or maybe Kim Jong-un's sister Kim Yo-jong is going to roll out its iconic long statement slamming the South again.
Ryo-san, you want to add something about the quietness from North Korea side?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with Anton that North Korea is still taking this wait and see approach. But also regarding information warfare, psychological warfare, cognitive warfare, there's the messages that come out from up front, but there are also activities that take place underground in very subliminal, indirect ways. And so I would not be surprised if North Korea is involved in some way in social media or elsewhere. But also North Korea, again, adding to what Anton has said, in this case, North Korea doesn't need to do anything, at least in the upfront way, because they if they do that, that may turn things in an adverse way for them, right? In some way, in terms of political mood in South Korea. And so rather, I think North Korea is waiting and seeing, not just to sort of analyze and work out the next strategy or what the next step should be, but also that they'll say, okay, well, South Korea can sort of get into its own mess and make things worse for themselves, as opposed to us getting involved in that situation. So I think North Korea is sort of trying to sort of be very strategic here, and it'll be interesting to see how they go about things in the coming weeks or months.
Thank you very much. And time is up. So I really want to thank Dr. Hinata Yamaguchi from Tokyo and Mr. Anton Sokolin from Seoul for a very fascinating conversation over the last hour and so. Many more question marks to discuss, of course, and especially looking in the crystal ball, what to come. But at least I think we have managed to open up and discussed a lot of what's going on in North Korea and some of the regional questions as well. So thank you very, very much. And remember that this will be uploaded on social media and YouTube channels if you want to read it and listen to it once more. So thank you very much. Enjoy the evening or the day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.